Okay, today is October the 22nd, 2007. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with the Oklahoma State University Library, and we're doing a project called Women of the Oklahoma Legislature. And I'm here today at the Capitol with Kathleen Wilcoxson, who is in the
State Senate.
Elected
1996.
and again in 2000
and 2004.
So you're termed out
2008.
2000.
I have one more year.
Okay. Glad we're catching you now then.
Yes.
Okay. Our first question then is to, not really a question, but just tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you were born, siblings.
I was born in Lawton, Oklahoma, and grew up in Owasso, which is north of Tulsa, and a very small community at that time. We lived out in the country. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. My mother and dad finished high school. My dad is a World War II veteran. And we grew up in a small rural community, very close family, very involved in our church. In fact, that was our social life, was our church and our school. And we look back now and think, what in the world did our folks do to inculcate in all of their children the importance of education? Because we all have finished our doctorates and are very professional people, and it's been an amazing life and experience to watch all my siblings and their families and spouses achieve so high.
What birth order are you? Oldest, youngest?
I'm the next to the oldest, second daughter, my sister, and then I, and then my brother. My mother had 7 children in 5 years, and so she was very busy.
Let's say. And where did you get your degrees from?
I have my bachelor's degree in elementary education from Southwestern Oklahoma State University. It's in Weatherford. And I have my master's degree and my doctorate degree from Oklahoma State University, all in education.
When did you get interested in the political arena?
Well, my first experience was in the 8th grade when Henry Bellmon was running for governor, and he won as our first Republican governor of Oklahoma. I think that was about 1962. And my mother suggested that I read the newspaper, which I think today now how fascinating that was, but she encouraged me to read the Tulsa World and cut out all of the articles on Henry Bellmon. So I did, and I put them in a scrapbook. And when he won, I wrote him a letter, and I was in the 8th grade. I wrote him a letter and gave him this scrapbook. And the interesting part of that is, and something I've learned since then, was that he never wrote me a thank you note. And my mother never forgave him. And so when he ran for governor again in United States Senate and everything that he's done, it's been very difficult for her to vote for him because he ignored her daughter.
So with that, you probably send a lot of thank you notes yourself.
I try to remember to at least call and tell people thank you.
Well, how did you come to run for this office?
I was very involved in politics off and on through my adult life. And when my predecessor, Senator Helen Cole, retired or announced her retirement, some of my friends called me and said, have you considered running for her seat? Well, I'd always talked about running for House, but to run for Senate to me was an amazing thought, because all the senators I had known, except for Senator Cole, had been very wealthy, very powerful, very tall men. And, or at least that was my perception of them. So for me to run for Senate was quite an experience. But one of my friends just said, why don't you run? And I talked with my husband, and we started looking at it and doing some of the things that people told us we ought to do to even consider it. And one day I remember standing in my kitchen and I said to my husband, I think we could win this. And it was really an awesome experience to see that I was perceived as a viable candidate. It was fun.
Who was your campaign manager?
My husband. I had the greatest campaign manager, and he took such good care of me. He's so smart, and so we won that campaign with 5 opponents. We had a primary, a runoff, and the general election. But because I had such a great campaign manager, we won that with like $36,000. And today those campaigns are just astronomical. But I'll never forget the time I was so tired, and I was out in Mustang, and it was pouring down rain, just pouring down rain. And I was tired, and you can't imagine how grueling a campaign is. And I thought, I have to stay out here in the rain. Then I realized how awful I probably looked, and nobody wanted to answer their door to a wet woman. So I went home, and my husband and one of our volunteers were in the garage making campaign signs, and the sun was shining. And he said, "What are you doing home?" And I said, "Well, it's raining in Mustang." And I just started crying. This is what a great manager is. This is a good story. I just started crying. So he said, "It's okay." And he took me upstairs and tucked me into bed. And I felt so safe and so secure. And I knew I'd never have to go knock on doors again. 2 hours later, he did. He came back and he said, "It's time to wake up. And here are your cards. You need to go knock on doors some more." So he never let me quit. No matter how tired and grueling and discouraging it gets, you have to have someone like that to support you.
Did you have a slogan?
What was my slogan? Preparing for the future today. That was my slogan.
Each time or just the first time?
Each time.
Each time.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do, and you said you did signs, so he put those up?
He did everything. He was awesome. He organized my campaign. He didn't make phone calls, and he didn't knock on doors. But he did pass out brochures, and he organized my life for me. He was awesome on that. He understood all the data and how to do all that hard work.
What was election night like?
It was exciting because I think we pretty much knew we had won. We knew if we won the primary, we would win the general. And so after we won the primary, people started paying attention to me. And it was a fun night, though. Thousands of people. We went down to J.C. Watt's watch party because that's where all the Republicans were hanging out. And my parents came, and my husband was there, and my daughter was there. My sister and her husband were there. It was fun.
And then what about swearing-in day?
That was not so much fun as awesome. To see me get to walk onto the Senate chamber floor as a senator for Oklahoma and stand up there and swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States, Constitution of Oklahoma, and to really realize the support and the trust that 70,000 people put in me. That was very humbling and awesome. And to this day, I rarely walk onto that chamber floor without that feeling of awe and praying that God will give me the wisdom that I need to do what is right.
Well, where was your office your first year?
It was in a little corner, but no, really, I had Senator Cole's office because nobody wanted it. It was a very nice office. It's up here on 5th floor, but it has no windows to look out. And a window, is very important for status. And I had no window. So I got to keep her office, even though it was one of the biggest. I had her office because I had no windows. It was okay.
How many years did you have it?
Pardon?
How many years did you have it?
I had it for as long as I wanted it. I think I had it for 10 years, come to think. And then I moved in here. And I like this office because it's on the corner and it's got a big window and big enough for a couch.
It does have a nice view out the window.
Great view. And I thought since these are my last 2 years, I would like to have an office with a window.
Sure. Do you remember the first bill you presented on the floor? Or at least the feelings that went behind it?
I don't really remember the first. I think I may remember it, but I thought for sure that my own colleagues in my caucus would not ask questions of me and make me defend it. But we have a tradition on the Senate floor that when a new senator introduces his or her first piece of legislation, that it is tradition to give that person a terrible time and to ask questions that are totally off the wall and could not be answered, but that new senator has no idea that that's what is happening, and then to debate against it. So it's just truly funny now to see it happen to all the new senators, and they all vote against it. We just all vote against the bill.
Kind of a little bit mischievous.
It is. That is the initiation to the Senate floor.
Well, what was the first bill that you presented that passed through, or a favorite bill of yours?
It wasn't my bill, but it's a bill that I consider very, very important, and we have been recognized at the national level on the importance and the quality of this bill. It was Senator Penny Williams' bill, but I put the good stuff in it as far as reading instruction for early reading, and how we as state policymakers can make sure that our children are getting the correct instruction in the components that are necessary for successful reading. And I got to do that, and that was real fun, and I was very proud of that.
Any so far that haven't been successful with?
Oh, most of my bills are not successful. My bills are, many of them, focused on education, and it is my purpose to see. Well, last year I had a bill that I couldn't believe went down, and that is that our graduation rates in high school are very low. And I was addressing an issue that I thought would be very important and very helpful in our young people understanding the importance of a high school graduation. And even my own colleagues voted against it. So I guess it wasn't a good bill. I'm going to try again, though. Sneak it in this time.
Well, what committees have you been a part of?
I've always been on the Education Committee, and this year I'm the co-chair of the Education Committee. And that's been a real honor because there's never been a Republican as the co-chair of the Education Committee. So I have had a wonderful time on that, and have enjoyed being in the leadership. I'm always on the Finance Committee, which is a difficult committee, but I asked to be on that one because it's a very important part of our state government, because we look at taxes and all of the issues dealing with finance in our state. And that I have learned a lot about state government from that committee that I didn't know about before. Health and Human Resources, which I really enjoy because I'm very interested in how we deal with our people, our most vulnerable citizens. I'm very interested in that. So those are my three main committees. And then quite often I'm on various appropriations committees.
And you've chaired one? Have you chaired? But you've co-chaired. Have you chaired?
No, the Democrats have always been in control of the Senate for 100 years. We're 100 years old this year, and the Republicans have never been in control of the Senate. So I always tell my friends, if you don't like what's happening in government, then you need to check with the Democrats, because we have never been in control. And so this year was the first time that we've had 24 Republicans, and we also have 24 Democrats. So it's been a historical year. We've set precedents that have never happened before in state government, particularly in the Senate, because we have 24-24. So we've had to divide the power equally, and it's been fun to watch people outside of the Senate when they put bets on us as to when we will implode. But we have been very determined, Democrats and Republicans, that we will not implode, that it will be very successful with how we deal with one another. Senator Judy McIntyre, is from Tulsa, and she is my Democrat co-chair. And we laugh because the only thing that she and I have in common is that we're both short and we're both women. She's as black as I'm white, and she's as liberal as I am conservative. And so, in fact, on the conservative rating, she was 3% conservative, and I'm way up in the high 80s or low 90s on conservative. So here we have these two women who are totally opposite of one another. But we've also prided ourselves on being a role model on how two women can be so different philosophically, but yet our goals are very much the same. And our goals as co-chairs of the Education Committee is that our children will get quality education, that there'll be accountability, transparency. And so we've worked very hard for that. And sometimes we disagree, but most of the time we've been very successful in achieving some of our goals.
Well, do you interact with her much outside of that meeting?
No, she's from Tulsa, so she goes home quite frequently. I live here in Oklahoma City, so I go home all of the time. That's one of the challenges I have faced as a legislator. It gets kind of lonely because in the 24 Republicans, I'm the only woman. So that's kind of lonely. And the men don't mean to leave me out, but I'm not one for golfing, and they're not one for tea parties, you know. So when we go on conferences and conventions, it gets a little bit lonely there because there isn't a way for us to really socialize without our spouses. And I don't go out with the men. That doesn't look good. So that gets lonely.
How about out with the other women in the other party? Then?
And then the other women, they're out with with the Democrats, and so the Democrat women have it a little bit better. We do have times where the women will call a caucus just for fun, kind of get the guys off track, and we do have women's night out once in a while, and that's important.
Any other gender differences that you see?
No, somebody asked me that the other day. Do men treat me differently because I'm a woman on the Senate floor? And I say men treat me differently off the Senate floor. They're very respectful to me, and they're very good to me and take care of me. But on the Senate floor, there is no gender on the Senate floor. And I appreciate that. I mean, it's all, we're there for work. And they don't care if I'm a man or a woman or what color I am. They evaluate what I have to say on the basis of philosophy and their district and what's best, what they perceive as best for the state. Doesn't matter. And that's the way it ought to be.
Well, do you have a particular political philosophy?
Oh, I have a political philosophy. I'm very conservative. My philosophy is very conservative, I guess, because of the basis of who I am as a person. I'm a Christian, and so I'm pro-life, and my vote is always pro-life, pro-family. I don't want to increase taxes because I know what impact that has on families. I'm very much of pro-business, so I support the tort reform laws and the workers' compensation reform and tax structure reform. And people say, well, doesn't everybody do that? No. And so that's where our philosophies really begin to diverge, is when it comes to issues like that.
Well, describe a typical day for you during session.
Oh, those are so fun. And I'm going to miss it so much next year. But a typical day would start very, very, very early in the morning, about 5:30, when I walk my dog. And he and I walk for 2.5 miles. My neighbors and I go walk. And that's really important. Now, some people think that's not an important part of the day, but that's very important because it energizes me, it wakes me up, and it gets me moving. So we walk for 2.5 miles, and then I'm back home, and I go very quickly then to get to work here on time. But when I get to work, there's always food. Somewhere there's food, and breakfast everywhere. And that's interesting because a lot of people, a lot of different associations and organizations will bring breakfast in. So someday the farmers will have some food in here, and the next day the electric co-ops will have food in here, and the next day some education association will have food in here. So it's just food all the time. And we have meetings all morning in our various committees. And then at lunch, somebody will have lunch for us. Same kind of associations and organizations, and then we go at 1:00 into session. And during the busiest times of the year, we're there in session, and that's when we vote on the bills that have passed the committees. And so that's when the great debates happen, and we're sometimes there till 5 or 6. And after that, then we go eat again. That's when we go to receptions. There are receptions all over the city. And so if you really want to party, you go to all these receptions. And invariably, after the receptions, then we have dinner. And we go to dinner with various organizations. And it sounds like we party a lot. Well, I guess we do. But it's important because that's when I really begin to talk to people about issues that I don't have any idea about. And so that's when I talk to the electric co-ops or PSO or OG&E or AT&T or Cox Cable or the farmers or the bankers or maybe the savings associations. Because every one of them has their issues. And every one of them is concerned about a bill. Either they're for it or they're against it. And it's very important for me to know both sides of the issues. And that's when I learn a lot about what's going on about all of these issues that I have to decide how I'm going to vote. And so it's very important. So even though it sounds like we are partying, we're eating. That's what we're doing. And that's when we meet a lot of people. When you do a lot of networking, and then after that, some people go out. I don't know where they go, but I go home. And thank goodness I get to walk 2.5 miles the next day, because they say on the average a person will gain 30 pounds their first year in the legislature.
Men and women?
Well, I promised myself I would not. I tried to eat strawberries and carrots a lot. Those receptions especially. Yes, it's very easy to gain weight because it's a sedentary job, and there's food everywhere. And it's not just food. It's very good food.
And you get to walk it off when you campaign the next time.
Then 4 years later, we walk it off again. But that's a lot of pounds in every 4 years, so can't walk it off. Just have to quit eating. Have to be very, very strong. But I still need that fellowship and that social part of our work here, because that's how I get to know, as I said, many of the issues.
Do you have a mentor?
Not any longer.
What's Helen?
I mean, I'm the old lady around here now.
Oh.
Yeah. Helen was a wonderful mentor. And she told me one time, she said, when you walk onto that Senate floor, you owe nobody anything. Not one person on that Senate floor, she said, voted for you. You don't represent a one of them. And I thought that is an awesome concept. So when a senator will come up to me and say, do me a favor and just vote for this. No, not if I don't think it's the right thing to do. Because that's not why I'm there, is to do another person a favor. My purpose there is to represent my district and also do what I believe is best for the state.
Well, how do you come up with the bills you want to present? Do constituents bring?
Sometimes constituents do. Sometimes we read the news. As we read the newspapers and we see an issue, we need to address that. For example, I had one maybe last year or the year before, but I was reading in the newspaper about this person who won the lottery, millions of dollars in the lottery, and the law says that anybody who wins the lottery has to identify themselves to the Department of Human Services so that if they owe back child support, that money, that is taken from their winnings, because that's only right. Well, this person who won all this money put his money in a trust, so we never knew who that person was. And I understood why that person would put their money in a trust, because it was a huge amount of money. And we know what happens to people when they win huge amounts of money. So he wanted to protect himself and his family and his earnings. But it was against the law, and the law did not say he couldn't do that. So that's how I decided we needed to look into that. So the new law that we have now, because I worked hard on that, was not only does that person have to identify themselves to the DHS, the Department of Human Services, for back child support, but also for back taxes. No Oklahoman should win earnings on a lottery and still owe the state taxes. But we were also very careful in stipulating that that person's identity will be protected. So I think we took care of both issues. But that's how I did that, and that's how I came up with that. So read the paper. Most of the time in my education bills, I do my research on education. I know what that's all about.
Well, have you had the same assistant all 12 years?
I have. Well, no, that's not true. Senator Cole had an assistant, and she was a delightful lady. And if it had not been for her, her name was Estella, I couldn't have survived. I had no idea what I was doing when I walked in here. I had just come from a 5th grade classroom. And so when I walked in here, she just took care of me, and it was wonderful. She knew my constituents. She knows the state government. But she passed away the next year. And Deborah came in and started working with me, and she just takes care of me. She runs my life. She's good.
Is it unusual to have one for that length of time?
I think it
The same
is.
person?
I think it is. But she's just been wonderful to me and very good to me.
Do they do some of your research for you?
Not in the Senate. She doesn't do any of my research, and I wouldn't expect her to. But I'll tell you what she does do. She takes care of my constituents. When there's an issue out there, she knows where to go in the bureaucracy. One of our jobs as a state legislator is to help work through the bureaucracy for our constituents. And Deborah knows exactly how to do that. I get flowers quite often. Come in and there's a beautiful bouquet on her desk, and I'll say, well, what did I do this time to get this bouquet of flowers? But that's her job, is to take care of my constituents. When the phone rings and she answers it, I tell her I want them to know that they're talking to me as well.
Have you had any disappointments?
In the legislature, oh, it gets disappointing when you have goals and you just never quite meet them. But a person would never be a legislator without being an idealist and without having huge goals and being a visionary. You wouldn't put yourself through the grueling campaigns if you didn't have those goals and ideals and visions. But at the same time, I've learned that most of the state doesn't have the same goals and ideals that I have, and they're not wanting to work in that direction at least as quickly as I would like to. That's the disappointment.
As you finish up next year, what are your plans? Are we allowed to discuss
Oh,
that?
absolutely. I'm going to go back and teach 2nd grade, and I cannot
Second,
wait.
instead of 5th?
Yeah. I that's what I am as a teacher. And I have been so blessed to get to do this for 12 years. Not many women have gotten to do this in our state, and I feel truly honored that I have gotten to do this. But my real calling in life is to be a teacher, and I'm going to go back and teach school and do professional development with young teachers, mentor young women. Wouldn't that be awesome? I cannot wait to go back and just get to do that again, finish my career as how I started it.
Well, you mentioned you had a daughter. Do you expect her to go into politics? Any
I
inklings?
don't think so. I just expect her to give me a grandbaby someday.
Well, did she come and see you in operation here?
She did when she was a little girl. Now she's grown and married. doing her own thing now. But she's proud of me. But she has seen how hard it is to do this.
Not a 40-hour week.
It is not a 40-hour week, and it's hard to get here. That's what I tell young women. I've had young women talk to me about running for a particular seat, and the guys got mad at me one time when I did this, but they brought in a young woman and they said, we want you to talk to her and encourage her to run for a particular Senate seat that's coming open in the next year. And she was a beautiful young woman and very intelligent, highly educated, successful in her career. And I was just very impressed with her. And I said, well, tell me, do you have children? And she said, yes. In fact, they were 2 and 3 or something like that. And I said, oh. I said, what are you going to do with your children in a grueling campaign? And what are you going to do with your children when you're here and they're at home? Because 4 months out of the year, really a lot more than 4 months out of the year, we're here. And I said, since she said, do you think I ought to run? I said, no. I really think that women, in looking at a position like this, need to understand that their children cannot be first in this job if they want to be successful, or at least it's just be awesomely difficult. And I said, there's a time and a place, and it will be very surprising to her how quickly 12 years will pass when that seat becomes open again. So she didn't run, and she has been back to my office several times, and she has told me several times, thank you for encouraging her to take care of her children and then do this when, later, because there's always you can do this, but you can't always have your children at home.
Any other advice you would offer them if they didn't have children? What else would you have to tell women considering running?
To consider running, well, you have to know who you are and what you believe, and that's sometimes difficult to really know exactly what you believe. You got to have a passion for something, and then if you do decide to run, you have to know that you have to work harder than you've ever worked in your life, ever. And you have to have a fire in the belly, because you can't win unless you have that passion and that fire in your gut, because it's too hard to get out there and knock on thousands and thousands, literally thousands of doors, total strangers, and say to them, I want to be your state senator or your state representative. And then just work real hard. Women have to, well, I don't guess we have to work any harder than men, but I think we do. I really do think we do.
You want to elaborate on that?
Well,
yes, ma'am.
I don't know. I think when I talk with women legislators, they know the issues and they know the pros and cons and what's going to be hitting them when they deal with it. And sometimes men just kind of ride along.
I had a note to ask you about school vouchers. That's just recent though, isn't it? April.
Oh, I wrote an editorial on that.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting, and more people have remarked on that. And that is not a sword on which I would die. But one of the senators had a bill that, in effect, provided vouchers to children who were learning disabled or who were handicapped in some way. And special education costs local school districts a whole lot more money than would just regular education. Cost a whole lot more. So what we were going to do is to say, well, this children could take a certain percentage of the money that the state would automatically pay for that child, and that parent could take that money and enroll that child in a special school where that child's needs could be better met, perhaps, and then the parent would cover the difference, but at least they would have a little bit of state monies. And it turned into a real debate. I was shocked that people were not willing to consider that, because you're not only helping the school district and the state financially, you're giving parents a choice to say, I think my child could do better at this private school, but yet we're helping them out financially with their own taxes that they pay. That was my idea of it. And it turned into a real hullabaloo. And so the senator who carried that legislation said, why don't you write an editorial about that? So I did. And more people have spoken about that than about any other issue.
Comes up when you Google.
Pardon?
It comes up when you Google your name.
Really? Are you
I'm
serious?
serious.
Well, I better write another editorial then about something.
The other thing I came across was the Drowned Nights.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Good piece.
Oh, that, I could not believe it when some people came up to me. Now, that is how one bill came to my desk as a constituent request, because students are encouraged to go to these clubs and drown themselves literally in beer. And sometimes they're minors. And I don't remember exactly how we addressed that legislation. It was very weak. By the time the Restaurant Association got through with this, and by the time all of the different clubs got through with this, it was a very weak piece of legislation. But I think what the purpose of that really came out of that was that we let people know that we're aware of what's happening in these clubs. And if they are encouraging minors to come in there and drink, then we're watching. And we want parents to know what their children are doing. So that was pretty much, it passed, but it was such a weak bill. I think what it really has done is educated the public and the providers that this is not acceptable behavior on the part of our young people or the clubs. Can you believe it? Drown night? Encouraging young people to drown themselves in alcohol. Well, and that's how they kill themselves and destroy themselves. I just don't understand that.
Now, one success then, you got that passed, whether
It's passed.
as strong as you would like for it to be. And if you are in interim studies, let's see, dropout rates and GED requirements, tobacco tax reinforcement.
Yeah, that's somebody else's. My interim task force this summer is going to be I guess it's fall now. We're going to be having that later this month. But looking at the impact of dropping out of high school, and when we look at the impact financially to the state, it's unbelievable the revenue we lose just in income tax over that person's lifespan, because their income is so low just compared to those students who graduate. And then when we look at the incidence of people in poverty, people in poor health, the highest incidence of those people are dropouts. The highest incidence we have of teen pregnancy, suicide, is high school dropouts, and people in crime and in prisons. The greatest majority of those people are dropouts. So I would like to say that before I leave the legislature, that this is something that we address, and that we don't make it easy for students to drop out of high school. Right now we have a law that says that they are compelled to go to school until they're 16. And I would like to say that we strengthen that, and we let young people know the dangers that they're going to face and the hardships that they will face if they drop out. And the law today, this is unbelievable to me, the law today says that if parents and the school administrator thinks that it's in the best interest of a young person or the community for that person to drop out of high school, all they have to do is sign a waiver and that student can drop out. And my point to the whole legislature, and I lost this bill last year, I cannot believe it. When is it ever in the best interest of a student to drop out of high school? It's never in their best interest, never. And why would we have it in state policy that we would even say in policy that, well, when it's in their best interest, they can do it? We shouldn't have that in our written policy. So that's my passion this year. We're going to look at that. And I'm going to try again. I'm not quitting on that one until I'm out of here.
And then you still won't quit.
And then I still won't quit. No.
Well, do you have any favorite memories? Any ones that pop to mind, to surface to the top?
I don't know that I have a favorite memory. I just know what an honor it's been to be here and to serve, and that people like me. And I was over in my own district a couple of weeks ago, and one of my constituents said to me in a public meeting, he said, when we voted for term limits, we didn't mean you. And I really appreciated that, because they don't want me to go. And I could get reelected again. But I think that term limits has been really good for Oklahoma. And 12 years are plenty, and I can go back and do what I did before and let somebody else come in who has new ideas, new energy, highly motivated. So that's good for Oklahoma. So I think some of my favorite memories are just the fact that I have made so many friends, and I appreciate this state.
Have you got to meet any famous people, like any presidents or such?
No.
No.
But,
Not
you know,
yet.
Miss Oklahoma, Miss America,
That
lots
counts.
of artists, wonderful artists, and great authors, and tremendous athletes, and I've met lots of wonderful people.
And do you have anything else I need to ask? I've covered most of mine. Were women supportive of your efforts when you were getting elected? Could you tell if there was more women voted for you, or
I don't have any idea. I don't think so. I ran only against men. So there were 5 men and then the little short school teacher woman. But I was talking to a campaign consultant, and he said, Kathleen, he said, you are exhausting your opponents, because I outworked them. And the only reason that people vote for other people, it's not because they're a woman or they're black or they're white or anything. It's because of the philosophy that you present, and the fact that you outwork your opponents. And I outworked them. And I was determined. I told my mother, I'm not going to lose this campaign by 10 votes. If I lose this, I want it to be by hundreds and thousands of votes, because I didn't want to stay home one day and lose it by 10 votes. Of course, I didn't. I won by 70% my first time, and 72% my second time, and the third time I didn't even have an opponent.
you should go one more time?
So I really don't think today, now perhaps some years back, or perhaps in our United States presidential election, people may vote for a woman because of the uniqueness of it. But I don't think at the state legislature or any local elections anymore that the fact that you're a woman makes any difference, or that it's a handicap one way or the other. It's just who you are as a candidate.
Well, do you anticipate keeping in touch with the women that you've met during your service here as colleagues?
I hope so. But you know, it's just like when I left teaching, those friends I still have them, and I still meet with some of them, but life changes, and I will get new projects, but I can't imagine losing a lot of the friends that I have now. But you know, I've learned this. Even though we're very good friends today, we have to make an effort to keep our friends. So I have to make an effort that I need to call my friends. We need to go out, have a cup of coffee, talk, keep up. Because if you don't, people get busy.
Really? Did any of your siblings go into politics?
Not a one.
Very.
I'm the only one.
Were they surprised when you did?
Not very. I guess because I've been so opinionated all of my life. And I think they were when I really did it. They were always we talked about it. But when I actually did it, and then actually ran a campaign and actually won, I think surprise was there, the element of surprise. But they're proud of me.
Or your parents at swearing in?
No. my sister came, but my sister and my husband and daughter came. Yeah.
That's special too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I usually end with a question: is what, when history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
What a nice question.
And it doesn't have to be just in this building.
That's a good question. I need to think about that. I want it to be that she lived what she believed, and I am a Christian, and I want my life to reflect Christian values, integrity, compassion, and goodwill, forgiveness, all of those Christian characteristics that we have to work so hard on. That I was a woman of passion, and I believed in quality education. I worked hard to make sure we have the best education that we can have for our young people. I'd like for that. And I want them to say she was a good mom and a great wife. And I think most of all, and this is, I guess, when people say, "Who are you, Kathleen?" I've always said this: "Who are you?" I would say, "I'm a teacher." And I would always like for people to remember me as being either a great second grade teacher, or a great teacher of teachers, or a great Bible teacher, because that's who I am.
Thank you very much.
How did we do?
We did great.